Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. You are tuned in to the Urban Conservative. My name is Chaz Neal, an activist based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And with me today, we're being brought to you today by the Leon Black Independent Media. Um, as well, I have John Tell with me, who is producer, co-host. And today we have a special guest who is based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, um, and is in the process of making a documentary. They Sleep Among Us. I'm honored to bring him on here to talk about not only his documentary, but as well as of who you are and the work that you have done, and what you are continually out here doing. So thank you for being a guest today, Aaron, and it's a pleasure.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. I was just saying a moment ago, thank you both for putting this all together. And I'm appreciative to have this opportunity to share some of my thoughts and kind of what I've been seeing out in these streets.
No, definitely appreciate it because we all have, and that's what I want the urban conservative to be. That's what the Leon Black is about, is giving people a voice that don't think that they're heard, because we all have voices, regardless of whatever side of it that we may be politically. We all have a voice, so and they all need to be heard.
Hmm.
Um, So let's get into Aaron Johnson. Don't exactly remember when we met, um, but I remember have seeing you constantly. Not only at what we're going to talk about today with encampment evictions, but also police brutality marches and events. Um, Standing up for. I remember I wasn't out there, but Prior Lake, we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. Even with Winston Smith, Delau Aid, but you also do a lot for trans and disability rights. And I love the way that you've always been a form of informative with the way that you put out your content, and that's one thing that I've always have appreciated about you, is the way that you put out your content, is because it's
Thank you.
it's you put it out there because it's easy to learn, and that's one thing that I really wanted to get into talking about today as well, is the move from being an activist and going to journalism, because there's a big difference, a little bit. So
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about just something I heard you mention along the way. Um, Thank you so much for calling me. That's like the highest compliment to me, is to say that I'm informative, because I never really set out to be a journalist per se. I grew up by what is now George Floyd Square, and I'm from a culture that isn't necessarily college centric. I mean, I grew up in South Minneapolis, and we got the police visiting us from age 8. Third grade is the first time I can remember. They come in to say, don't do crime, you're gonna get caught. This was the era. This was like the early '90s. I mean, I was in 1990. I was 8, so um, there was a lot of young kids starting to be involved in like gangs and stuff, So like a lot of the focus when I was coming up was just keeping us scared of the police, and looking at the military for options, you know what I'm saying, after school, and or to be able to reach school, college, continuing education. Like, I'm just not from a culture that encourages college the same way a lot of people typically can be. So that said, I never went to journalism school or any of that. And I just started showing up in these streets when everything happened. Um, Having grown up right where I did and seeing cup foods and everything that happened right in front of it, man, it hit different. It really hit different. And also, it's like, if you're not familiar with my story, there's like so much that goes into this that I don't want to get totally derailed. But to shorten it a lot, I had just become disabled from the neck down. I had just moved back to South Minneapolis from LA, where I was living at the time when I became disabled, um, and the pandemic had just hit, and I was hiding from the pandemic because I was newly disabled, and now there's this thing that's killing disabled people, and so like when that all happened, it was just so much at once, and I really experienced a lot of what was happening in my community through Unicorn Riot, through Georgia Fort, through um, King D, through King Demetrius, Lissa Media. All of those really brought me in. Mercado, I can't not mention Mercado. So like a
Right.
lot of those brought me in to being able to be in touch with what's going on in the streets, because I was just listening to it all exploding through the walls, laying in a bed, kind of like myself burning a molten hole in my mattress because I was so pissed, but I couldn't move or do anything. So I just really like that's it, it became just such a part of my story. And so when I did come back out into this world, um like when I became disabled, it was December 9th, 2019. So just to kind of put some context into when I went into isolation, I was disabled from the neck down. So I lived in a hospital, I lived in a nursing home for a total of about 2.5 months, and I had to escape the nursing home because it was just very bad neglect and stuff. That's why I came back to Minneapolis. Anyway, I went into isolation December 9th, 2019, and I came out around the time Derek Chauvin was about to get convicted and Dante Wright had just been killed. I was still in isolation when Dante Wright happened. And um, I just came out into the world and just started taking pictures of everything, man. Everything was fascinating to me. The neighborhood I grew up in was now the ground zero of the civil rights movement, and it was like a stage. Like the whole world had eyes on this neighborhood I grew up in, and I had new friends in New York asking me about cub foods, and I was like, no, cup foods. And it was the first
Right.
time I'm having this conversation with people across the country. So, which if you're local, that's like a kind of a thing here.
Right.
So anyways, when I came out in the world, I just started documenting everything. And also I wanted to convey messages that I was hearing to other white people who maybe didn't have access to be in the streets, or for whatever reason. And I also wanted to convey what was happening to my friends in New York and LA, two cities that I spent a combined 15 years living in, because they were not seeing on the news what was actually happening here, especially with things like, the military during Dante Wright. I can't remember the name of Safety Net.
Oh, Operation
So
Safety Net. Yeah.
yeah, so just to kind of say, that's how I got into it. I never set out to be a journalist per se. I just wanted to help inform people of what was really going on.
No, and that's you bring up Unicorn Riot. You brought up Mercado, who wasn't really just really grabbed his phone and basically
Right.
out there and wanted the experience. I don't think a lot of us chose the um, professions that we um, chose from seeing the George Floyd video. I know for me, I just wanted to. I grew up in that area as well. In 34th and Park actually.
Right
Um,
there.
yeah, went to Laura Ingalls Wilder school, which is also
All right.
down the street.
Yep. You get it.
So that was for me. It hit home. I don't know why any other Minneapolis police murders never hit home the way that George Floyd did.
Hmm.
But I am glad that with even everything that I've been through and I've seen, I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's made me, I know, a better person. Even the people that I've met, and I've met some incredible people. I just hate the way that I've met them, because under the circumstances, it's always um, a traumatizing period, or
Yeah.
of meeting people. So I, I know that just it hasn't been easy, but I know the journey of just wanting to be something different, to show something different, and that's what really pushed me into uh, an an area of what we want to call journalism, because journalism is what it is. I think I lean more now towards independent media uh, than CNN, Fox
Mm-hmm.
9, or anything like that. So I'm grateful for the King Demetrius's, Mercado, Georgia Fort, Unicorn Riot, uh, and there's so many of them. Even though a lot of people like to see them as weapons of the left or weapons of the right. I just look at it as media.
I wanna touch on that really quick actually because it's a good thing and a bad thing. We need balance, and media, journalism is a check and balance in our system of our so-called democracy, right? We the people are supposed to check what's going on around us, and media is a way to do that. Now, if there's far right entities like Fox News and so on and so forth, we were talking about Truth Social and whatnot.
Right.
Um, these entities can blast the left and liberals and black and brown people and poor people and all disenfranchised communities all they want to, and it's supported, it's emboldened, right? There needs to be a balance. And right now there isn't a balance. There's a chasm, right? And what I'm seeing, what we've seen, in my opinion, since 2020 is that void, a frenzy of people jumping in to fill that void in a number of different ways, bad or good, however you want to view it. But Aaron, you spoke on, the King Demetriuses and the Georgia Forts and the Mercados, and however people want to look at these different entities. People have grown in their own way, and what inspired them to take part in this movement is what we should look at, not where they're at currently. But with that being said, where everyone is currently, everyone kind of branched out to do their own thing as far as like the reflection of them or how they view um doing their part in this movement, right? We all, and the three of us here as independent journalists, we all have our own twist of how we put out content, and that's important in one. But also, I think it helps to fan out that check and balance that I'm talking about, as far as having so hard line entities for the far right and a voice for the far right. There is no far left. There is no progressive, like big mainstream. I mean, there's Democracy Now! Is what I'm a huge supporter of. There's Breakthrough News. There's these little entities who've got Unicorn Riot and Status Quo, and but I think that all of us as separate different little entities doing what we do best for ourselves is that check and balance, and I think that that's what's important. And so that brings me to a question for you, Aaron. um is that something that like has kind of transpired for you, like when you jumped in this movement or you got inspired from 2020? Like, have you found like your niche with your reporting? What is it? And how do you intend to use that tool to put out the narrative to the world, in tandem with like the kind of reporting that me and Chaz do, or that your Georgia Forts and your Mercados do?
Great question. To me, I mentioned like one of my biggest drives was, I felt like I had kind of access to this community that I grew up in, this area that I grew up in. It felt very personal, it felt very home. I told one of the, you know, people that kind of started George Floyd Square. I mean, that whole thing started by, sort of people just showed up and they just started cleaning up garbage off the street, just saying this is like a sacred space. And it just really snowballed, from there. And people just handing out masks. And I'm from that area, so like when I came out of the, isolation and whatever, and I started showing up there, well, and when I was watching all the live streams too, I saw so many brilliant messages, just brilliant speakers. I mean, just some of the most intellectual speaking I've ever seen.
Right.
And um I really just had a desire to capture those messages and bring them to, like I said, white people or people that and in full disclosure, I graduated from Hopkins High School, so it's the alternative program, but like very white, very college culture centric. Now, by the time I got there, I was like a teenager. I was like already skipping school and whatever. But anyways, I wanted to get messages to them. And so, my dad raised me. He is from a rough, depressed Michigan town. He grew up without a dad in the 50s and 60s. And he always told me growing up that I was his one-man revolution. And, I don't believe in that necessarily. It takes all of us. But I have been just filled with all these messages my whole life. And where I fit in, to get to your like real core of your question and how I see myself, is there's already a Georgia Ford. She's great. She's killing it. There's already these different, there's a Mercado, and he's catering to he's got his own crowd. And where I didn't know really where I fit in. It's like anything, like you just get out and you kind of start doing it, and then you realize, well, maybe live streaming isn't for me, because maybe I'm more like, I want to really focus on the quality of it and just really editing it down. And over time, it's like anything. It's like being a teenager again. It's like you really find where you fit in and how you're the most effective. And where I found I'm the most effective is by editing media, getting the sound and the quality right, in a way that's presentable, and then using like their voice to communicate like sort of what I'm thinking, like from the things that I learned from my dad and growing up in the South Side,
As we were talking about that, the whole journalism piece and the activism, it brought me to a clip that you actually filmed with somebody that we highly respect. Rest in heaven, Mel Reeves. He's been brought up numerous times on the Urban Conservative, the Leon Block, and name rings bells, and not only just Minneapolis, but all over the world, that people knew Mel Reeves. And this clip that we're about to watch here is about Kelvin Horton. And I don't know if you remember that. You might be a little bit better than I am. But if just any, because I do remember this when it happened with Kelvin. And, Mel went into some very good points that people weren't really looking at. They just were so quick to blame it on peaceful protesters instead of just really looking at the problem for what it really was. And even still that, even with, Kelvin Horton, no justice there, which, as a black man, we should never have to get used to. But, being 45 years old, and just seeing what Tyree Nichols, and then having to go through Rodney King and, even with Emmett Till. So it's something that we just, as, black, are desensitized to. But I play this clip. I'm only going to play like 2 minutes of it because I think that's where the greatest context that of the point that was trying to get into.
Words of wisdom. Come on up, Mel Reeves. He's a journalist, a reporter, excellent writer, just well studied and always willing to share his knowledge and his experience. I personally appreciate you, Mel, and you know what you do. Get it in.
All right. You should give yourselves a hand. First, give yourselves a hand. Go ahead, do it. Let's do it. Give yourselves a hand. It's okay. And give a hand to the folks who organized this. I think, yes, because, and as well as the family. Because people could have forgotten about Calvin Horton. In fact, that's kind of the point of what's going on. That they want people to forget about Calvin Horton. I heard somebody say, long as people remember your name, right? As long as folks remember your name, you still live on. And this family clearly has not forgotten their loved one. We live in a society, y'all, where we've got to start doing some thinking. We've got to start paying attention to what's really going on. If you pay attention to news lately, you see the United States is talking about getting involved in the affairs of Cuba and Haiti and other places, right? And so in order to get involved in the affairs of other countries, that's saying that you got your affairs in order, right? That's kind of what it says, right? So, right? So how can they get involved in Cuba's affairs and Haiti's affairs when they don't have their affairs in order here? How can they talk about human rights and civil rights when they don't treat us as human beings here, right? Well, we can't even get our civil rights. Civil rights are just what you've earned just by growing up in the society, right? Human rights are the rights that you have just by being a human being. And they have denied Brother Horton his civil and his human rights. And they've already allowed him to be murdered. And make no mistake about it, somebody said it earlier. This was like it was a murder. It was like a lynching. And it was an injustice because, after George Floyd was killed, they spent a lot of time talking about us, people rioting and causing problems and that kind of thing. But they just glossed over the fact that in the middle of that, it wasn't us that was rioting. It was white supremacists that burned down a lot of Lake Street. Don't know it, Dan. Yes. And there were white.
That for me, right there, and that was just a short clip of, male, but the context of that, it was people were so caught up in not what we're out there fighting for, but what we're out there marching for is what they were, the peacefulness. It was because it wasn't, from what I remember, and I was out there, Lake Street, 3rd Precinct. I was there when it went up. I was there when AutoZone first went up with Umbrella Man. And I will say it like this. I didn't see people that were out there that wanted justice, accountability, and transparency throwing cocktails. We wanted what everybody else wanted in America, justice. So that I really do appreciate it. And honestly, there was another clip that I want to get into too with another guy that I look at, another black man that I look up as a mentor, Thompson. And this was taken during days. I think it was maybe what? Hold on. I'm new to this. But I want people to also listen because John really got into context with this. And this was, if I can see the date, April 7th, this last year. And if I remember correctly, this was the day that Potter was sentenced.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So I do remember this day very clearly. And I watched this clip this morning and I thought back of John's words. And it was crazy because I think honestly, after April 7th, we lost 2 more people to police violence in Minneapolis. And he clearly states it that it was going to clearly happen again and that there wasn't going to be anything but basically what we keep on getting. So I really wanted people to pay attention to that. And you really got some great clips from that just make me reminiscent, honestly, just to think like it was just yesterday. So I really do appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying that.
We'll be here again. We'll be here again. I'm not psychic, I'm just black. Because of laws and statutes that are put on the books to defend this type of action. As a chef, and I'm not a chef by the way, but as a chef, I can't feed you seafood and you're allergic to seafood and you lose your life because I'm going to jail. As an airline pilot, I can't crash land the airplane and somebody die because I'm going to jail. When y'all gonna hold police accountable for when they crash land, when they botch no-knock warrants? And I tell y'all what to do. I tell y'all what to do. Because we can't beat the law, let's change the law. Let's put our names on these books and challenge these lawmakers in these seats. Remember who disappointed you today. Because they'll be knocking on your door tomorrow, asking for you to vote for them this November. Remember these people. Stop voting for these people time and time and time again. Or you're comfortable with what you're getting. Pardon my brass delivery, but you'll get more time for killing a dog than you will get for killing a black man here in this state. You'll get more time for kicking a dog. You get more time for kicking a dog than you will for killing a black man in this state. It is okay in open season on black people. The same man who's in this doggone police report that killed a mill out, the same man, part of the team of people said it's time to go hunting. Who's he hunting for? Who's he hunting for? Another out of shootout? Minnesota, we have a police problem. And until you admit that we have a police problem, we're going to keep on having a police problem. You think these people want to be out here in the rain, snow? You cannot sit up here and tell me that it's
you know, I stopped that there because weather conditions. We live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this brings to a great point of to why I wanted to interview you and the homeless encampments. The documentary, They Sleep Among Us. You have, when we talk about police, we don't just see the police brutality. We see that police are weaponized against community members. And that's what I really want to get into, because John brings up very good points. And from your experience of, you know, he brought up, and this was last April, and we just went through an election, and we have a mayor who said he was going to end homelessness in 2017. And you know, we have politicians that are running off of these promises of ending homelessness and stopping the, you know, at least preventing gun violence, but yet we don't see none of that. We can't even get them to vote properly for us, we the people, but we see them do it for corporations or LLCs. And that's what I want to get off into when we talk, get into They Sleep Among Us, because you have been at numerous city council meetings. You have been at numerous press conferences. And I really wanted to really start it off is, how do you feel from covering everything that you've covered and to see the climate that we are in politically? Do you ever feel like we're ever going to get anywhere with the way that we keep going?
Man, I wish I had an answer that anyone wants to hear, but no, I don't. Basically, here's what I'm seeing is, you know, well, first of all, a little more about my background. I've experienced chronic, I call it homelessness about myself, pretty much my entire adult life, on and off. And let's talk about, what does homelessness mean, or what does that look like, or being unhoused? What's the difference between homelessness and unhoused? And why are people saying we should now call it this instead of that, etc.? And let's go into that just real quick, because yeah, okay. So basically, all right. So long before I was physically disabled, I didn't know that I have invisible disabilities. I am ADHD diagnosed. I have depression. That is actually a qualified psychological disability. We don't think of it in these terms. So is anxiety. And so these things, they hold me back. My whole life, I would go to job interviews and stuff, and I would know I'm different and not know why or how. I would just know that they always picked somebody else that had their it together, you know, and probably had like nicer clothes or something. And I just never understood why. Like I always didn't understand it. And I learned a lot about that since becoming physically disabled and becoming a disabled rights activist in that journey. But um, you know, being homeless for me meant my roommate moved to LA and took a sublease on the apartment above us. This was in New York City. And um, you know, that's just how he made his money for a couple months until we got an eviction notice under the door, and so did the people upstairs. So, you know, I was in New York City. I was 21 at the time. It was right after 9/11. This was like 2003, something like that. And I was actually, this was 3 blocks below ground zero where I was living. It was very cheap down there afterwards. There was government grants. Actually, there was all these artists living on Wall Street, which is, you know, for a different conversation. It was an interesting time. But I got kicked out of that place. I had nowhere to go. I had no credit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't have my first credit card until Wings Financial Credit Union gave me a $500, 8%, not to give them a plug or nothing. I'm just saying, like,
Right.
I was like 32 when I had my first credit card. So getting apartments, getting like anything that requires credit was not that wasn't a reality for me. It was a reality for everyone else, but not for me. And so I couldn't just get an apartment. And also in New York, you need first, second, last deposit, plus you got to pay like broker's fees, and it costs like 10-15 grand plus just to move into like a studio apartment, you know, or even roommates or whatever. I mean, you're talking serious money. So now you're confined, like most people are confined to like subletting, you know, whatever. So now I was trying to sublet, but I didn't have enough for a deposit, and I didn't have like rental history. No, I was kind of new to New York, so I didn't really have a lot of like. And this is 2003. Not everybody just had an iPhone. You know what I'm saying? So like, or even necessarily a cell phone. So I was, you know, roughing it. I was new in a city. I was going to a lot of parties, meeting a lot of people, and I would just end up going to the after hours at their place and partying all night and crash on their couch. And it's kind of how I lived for like 20 years actually. But that said, that's in my background. And when we see these encampments today, you know, what I see is many people who are like me. I see myself in all of them, and I see them banding together for safety in numbers, especially with the elements being what they are here in Minneapolis. You know, it's easier to pool resources, or even just to have access to resources if there's several of them in one place, you know? So, you know, because now they're not just some person that's unseen living under a bridge. It's like, oh, that's the encampment on 29th and 14th or Cedar Riverside, or, you know, whatever. You're like, people are familiar with the camps. So there's entire drives for, you know, clothing and everything to even specific camps. So, you know, these camps are a result of our economic conditions, first of all. I mean, when the cost of housing goes up, the number of people who can't afford housing goes up. And it has to do with people like me who are disabled. I think you mentioned something about the City Hall press conference, so I don't want to like blow that up if that's what you're talking about. But in short, disabled people, according to a recent survey, 47% of people asked self-identified as being too disabled to work. And what that means is you qualify for Social Security disabilities, like myself. 3 years after becoming disabled, too disabled to work, I'm still without a check. I have to appear in front of a judge. I have to be tried. I have to be followed by private investigators for the rest of my life. And this is to get less than $10,000 annual, because they have not adjusted Social Security disability benefits since 1972. So disabled people are living in 1972 standards, quality, you know, whatever, but in 2023 housing market. So
I was just talking with Chaz earlier about how the fact that our wages haven't even been adjusted. We're essentially still making the same that we've been making since 1978.
I mean, that's with adjustments, but imagine if you were making, like, actually had never even gotten a raise since 1972. And that's a year before Roe v. Wade, you know, just to put this all into timeline, you know, how bad it really is and how invisible people with disabilities truly are. So that was 47% of people that self-identified. Now, keep in mind, there are things like I mentioned earlier, psychological disabilities, people like myself that didn't understand how being neurodivergent was affecting my chances at living. You know, we got people like my aunt Thank you. We got people like my aunt who's paranoid schizophrenic. She's been homeless on and off my whole time growing up here in the Twin Cities. She does she necessarily know that she's schizophrenic and that it's not the rest of the world? You see what I'm saying? Would she self-identify as being self-identify as being too disabled to work? In my opinion, no, she wouldn't, because it's everyone else, and that's the problem with psychological disabilities. So a lot of people living in these camps, they're just disabled people like me who probably are in my similar situation. And I'm trying to get the mayor. I found out today actually if he's interested in being in my film, but
Oh,
I don't want to
okay.
say too many bad things. I'm like,
Right.
that said, there is a major disconnect from our city and from our people in this, in what I've seen.
Well, you not to bring up to so much the mayor, but do you feel like there's because this last election, the people in Minneapolis voted for strong mayor,
Yep.
which is to me has been, I see a lot of confusion within the city government with it feels like the blame game, pointing fingers.
Yes, it does.
It's, and honestly, we have some very good council members in Minneapolis. I just don't feel like when it comes to the legislative part of it, I don't feel like there's enough done, and just even going back to with elections and, things, these people ask us for our vote, but yet they come up for press conferences, but yet when we really need them, they're nowhere in sight. And I know for, part of your documentary, have elected officials been supportive? Have you, because I'm just thinking of the districts that, like Osmond, have you reached out to Jamal Osmond?
I reached out to them all.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah.
And have you had any luck with any of them?
So I have, surprisingly. I'm kind of back and forth if I want to go on about names, because in my head I'm kind of like, there's actually kind of a lot of division in our city hall, and I think it's important to know who stands where, but I also think like part of becoming educated is like seeking out that information and really not just hearing it from me. You know what I mean?
Right. No.
So, I also kind of want to say, like, I kind of want to treat City Hall as a institution that is of itself. So I'm going to choose not to name names, and I don't want it to be a popularity contest also, because there are good people on both sides of this topic. There are council members from neighborhoods that are heavily impacted by a declining economy and simultaneous real estate boom, and that are against the camps. And there are people that are council members in similar conditions in their district who are heavily like supportive. And I'm saying they show up to the camps and they check it. Hey, are you good? And it's not when cameras are around. The residents are telling me this. They're like, dude, no one is around. And they just come in sometimes and they're like, I'm such and such, like, you got coffee, or, they're trying to help by themselves. And I just have a lot of respect for that. So I would encourage more council members to be like those individuals. But that said, I really want to break down this topic. My movie, I don't want it to be propaganda. I don't want it to be, you watch it and you're like, it's just heavily one-sided. Where I feel we're going to address this topic and situations like this topic is through conversation and education, and really understanding, people have this narrative that's just out in the wild that it's all, I hear this all the time. It's mostly just drug addicts and the mentally ill. Oh man, like, let's break that down for a minute. All right, first of all, what is the mentally ill? Are those criminals? Did somebody break a law? They woke up, they're like, dude, I'm going out today and I'm going to be mentally ill. No, like, you know what I'm saying? My aunt that I was just talking about, like, growing up, she would like hit me up, or not hit me, like I would see her on the holidays or something, and she would be like, Yeah, like I go to a lot of singles dances. You know, it's like a before Tinder. You know, these people would go to like see cover bands and mingle with other singles. Whatever. And she had this whole conspiracy theory that there was a group of everyone at these singles dances that were all like connected with each other, and throughout all of our city, like they were planting these kind of different pit traps along the way. So the one time she's like, yes, I was getting on a city bus and this large woman bent in front of me and farted in my face, and I knew, and I'm not making that up, I know it's a silly story, but it is a silly story. I was like 10 when I heard that. Believe me, I laughed. It's okay. But she was like, and I knew it was them. You know what I'm saying? And first of all, that's not against the law. There's no reason to go to jail for thinking that. And second of all, there's no reason to have to live in the outdoors in Minnesota where it can get wind chills of minus 50 in the wintertime. And let's not like forget the summertime, it can be 110 degrees. So
Right.
these are very unlivable conditions. And why are we demonizing people with, again, psychological disabilities? People are not born deciding to become this like incredibly challenging way of living life. Nobody makes that decision. And also,
Aaron, let me ask you this: like, what are the three different things that you are looking to accomplish with this specific documentary? And I'm going to follow up a question with that too.
Yeah, my specific thing that I want to break it down and say, hey, you're like your comfy couch that's in an affluent suburb, maybe. How are you hearing the messages of the people experiencing this every single day? Because you're not going to leave that couch and come into an encampment where you're probably scared of germs or being robbed and this and that and the other thing. So, how can I bring these messages to them? And then also, so that's number one. Number two, what am I hoping to accomplish? I'm hoping to accomplish a safer path forward. I'm hoping to inspire conversations that actually result in real solutions that are saving lives. If I had to pick a number third, it would be just the general importance that people are people, and we don't need to like demonize, segments of our society to feel better for ourselves, or just like what really are the causes of this. I mean, that's, I guess, that all three in one right there. What is causing this, and what is the solution?
Oh,
Wow.
you make
Yeah.
right. No,
Go ahead,
and
Chad.
you make very good points. And there was, I know, and I don't know if to part with, I think his name was King.
Yeah.
I can't really decipher it back word for word.
Mhm.
But I want to just play this clip real quick, and there's another one that I want to play. That is, and maybe this will help you. It is with the woman, with the safety jacket on.
Yeah, Angel.
Angel. Okay, I didn't know her name. So those are.
Whatever.
I just wanted. Those are the two clips I'm gonna play.
Yeah.
So I'll get into King first because this hit really home with me. The words, because I think a lot of people stereotype exactly what homelessness is and what it looks like.
Yes, they
So
do.
that's why I'm excited for your documentary as well, for the simple fact that you're showing a side that people aren't always either comfortable to go into, or they don't feel like they want to help, but they're scared because of the stigmas and the stereotypes and the labels behind homeless people. So play this clip real quick, and I didn't even share it yet. I'm like usual.
It's
You
still
got
before
it.
you, right? Yeah.
And I choose who's gonna come. But what you're gonna see on this movie is what's really going on, and we're gonna document what's really behind the scenes, what you don't see on both sides. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not on the street no more. I chose to go and get mine straight, man. So I'm on a narrow path trying to get mine in order. It's hard out here for a lot of people, and wearing that burden, that weight of so many people that are lost, addicted, strung out. You know what I'm saying? I was with them, amongst them, a part of them, one of them. But it almost drove me radicalized, bro. It almost made me mad, bro. It almost drove me insane, bro. But I know one thing, though. I kept a strong mind because I kept my faith and I stayed looking forward to the good, knowing that there is something to look forward to. But I know the truth, that it's only going to get worse.
Talk about it. Talk
What can I
about it.
say
He
for
said
you,
that
bro?
beautifully. Because he's right. Like in this day and age, you have to have a strong mind. You also have to have a sensitive mind, a delicate
Man,
outlook, but also a
yes.
positive outlook, but also be realistic and know it's only going to get worse. So what are we going to do about that? And I have two questions for you because there's one thing that you did touch on that we kind of just jumped over real quick, and it's very important. I think it's very true and it speaks to the core of like what you do. But also, what is your style of journalism and what you do, like with this documentary, for example, and the kind of things that I've seen you talk about and do with your journalism? Why is it important today?
Oh,
Mm.
I appreciate being on here. Yo,
Wow.
you know, like there's like all these types of journalism, I guess, right? Like there's like investigative journalism, and they're like really asking the hard hitting questions, and like I think there's a place for that. And then there's, obviously we got what we call now the mainstream media, and can we trust them? They're being funded by their advertisers, and then their advertisers, they got their hands dipping into dropping off, giving our politicians a pound, basically. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's like I call myself, and I didn't invent this term. I had to Google it to see if I did, and I did not. But I call myself a street journalist. Just like we got
Mm.
street medics and we got everything. I'm a street journalist. I'm giving to you what I'm seeing where I'm from, because look at this beautiful picture. I took that in Alaska. My grandpa lived there, and he passed away, and I went there for his memorial. Rest in peace, whatever. I'm at peace, but it's a beautiful picture. And where I'm going with this, I know that seems out of the blue, but is
No,
that
that's real.
all right? All right. So what I want to say though is like, right, like I got friends in, like, here's Alaska, right? Like, or maybe the better analogy could be like California. Like, I'm in Minneapolis. What is the weather like outside here in Minneapolis? But if I'm talking to my friend in California and I'm like, what's the weather? And they're like, dude, it's 70 degrees. And I'm like, no, there's snow on the ground. What are you talking about? Which one of us is right? Which one of us is wrong? We're just saying what we're seeing. So what I'm trying to do with my journalism is I'm trying to show the world what I'm seeing, so that you can have an informed conversation and we can talk about it. Because you could be in New York, the epicenter of capitalism, where it trickles down onto a street level, and you get people like Jay-Z coming out of their culture, but you would never get a Jay-Z coming out of Minneapolis, because we're just a different culture. That's all it is.
Right.
So that's really what I'm trying to do with it. I'm trying to start these conversations. I'm trying to inform people. I'm trying to bring you into the encampments. I'm trying to bring the encampments to you. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Wow. That's powerful. You just painted a picture for me. And with that being said, I think you'll probably do the same with this next question, because it's something that the three of us speak on a lot. And I think a lot of people ask questions, the basic question, because they don't understand what is houselessness, being unhoused versus being homeless or homelessness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I started to say something, I just bloop, but yeah. So I mean, this is all just like kind of how I see it, right? Like I'm not, but it's from what I understand and what I've experienced and what I've seen. I say I was homeless because I was couch surfing. I have slept on the streets before, but I've never lived on the streets, which I'm thankful for. But um I didn't have a home. All my stuff was in storage, and I was living wherever the night took me, basically. But these people in encampments, they live in tents, and they're saying like, look, what is the definition of a home? Is it a mansion? Is it a 3 bedroom, two bath, little bungalow? Is it a apartment? What's a home? You could say what a house is, you could say what an apartment is, but what's a home? So for a lot of people, their tent is their home. And they say, I'm unhoused because they don't have a house, but they do have a home. And that really just feeds into kind of, I think calling it that is important in this situation because it really frames what is happening in these evictions. You see, you know, what I see when I see it is I sort of see like stories we hear growing up of like old 500 years ago, think Braveheart, or like maybe references in like the Bible or some kind of like kingdom, etc. You see the king's soldiers going into these poor villages and lighting them on fire and destroying all their belongings and all these like terrible things. Well, I've been filming these now for a year and a half, and that's what I see. Is I see the king's soldiers going in and destroying up all their belongings. I've seen people pleading with me to go talk to the cops because I'm white and I got whatever. It's real, dude. And so like they're like begging me, and they're like, "Can you please go like get my antibiotics? I've got an infection on my hand, and I can't I can't get my antibiotics. They won't let me in." And they didn't let them in, and they just destroyed it all in front of them slowly in a garbage compactor. So, and they have nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. They just end up in a new encampment eventually if they survive that long being by themselves. That's also real.
No,
Wow.
and that is very real. You have pictures, and I know what encampment this is. This is, which is no longer there, but this is was out by Home Depot. This was the quarry, right? They called the quarry. Can you guys see that? Am I sharing?
Yeah, hold on. Let me zoom in for everybody. I think we lost connection from
What, Aaron?
from Aaron. He froze for a second and then he lost. So let's just wait and see if he can
Okay.
hop back into the backstage. But yeah, I do remember this footage as well. He did like a drone shot from this, right? That he did like a little
Yeah, he did a drone. But I just wanted to go through the pictures. And I think maybe only had 2 pictures on this. But just to see the size, honestly, and this one was here for exactly 2.5 years. It was by a Home Depot. And I just feel, even this week they have. So there we go. There we go. All right, now we're back. Can you hear us, Aaron?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. I can hear you.
All right, cool. Sorry about that.
Right. So the post that I brought up is from the quarry, and I know for a lot of the encampments had been out there. They weren't just newer ones. They had been some of these had been up for years, and I think because of the way that Star Tribune, Fox, WCCO, CBS, all our local stations, the way that I'll even put Crime Watch in it, put out this narrative that the violence in those areas surfaces from the encampments. And I would have to say that's a lie. Yeah, there is, violence, but there's violence everywhere. It doesn't matter where we live at. There's instances, there's bad people. But to put it on a label on everybody is what really bothers me, because I don't know if you had ever been to I remember, and what a lot of people don't understand is how a lot of these things that Aaron does is Aaron isn't a nonprofit. He is seeking solidarity in what is something that is called mutual aid. And I don't think people honestly recognize, sometimes people don't recognize the difference between mutual aid and what a nonprofit is, because mutual aid is people coming together regardless of resources, but trying to find resources and helping others. So that's why I really got into really following Aaron, because of the mutual aid work that he does. And not only but just the people that he works with, with Home Base. I'm just trying to give shout outs to your people, man. You know what I'm saying? You know,
here with CUAPB.
Yes, CUAPB, Murin. I hope I said her name right.
Murin. Yeah, I don't. We're all.
So
on that one.
I appreciate it because of the simple fact that, and I hope that people learn what mutual aid is as well. And I hope that that's what I'm excited for, because I know the way that I watch your content, I learn from it, and it's very knowledgeable.
Thank you.
And it's easy format if we want to put it into, let's say, like the doctor uses it, layman's terms. And I hate to say dumb it down, but you make it where it's easy to learn, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm really, really, and I know I'm going to say this again, probably repeat it every time I talk about your documentary, but I'm very excited because I love seeing another side that isn't shown. And that's what journalism should be about, is changing the narrative, because the narrative always is not the same. And that's, I know I'm not great at asking questions. I'm probably a bad interviewer.
No, this is great.
You know, I am so grateful. And I don't have any of I tried to find the actual trailer that you had put up for it, because I still don't. I know my show is usually an hour, but I'm going a little bit longer today with you.
I got a little time.
Yeah, so if it's okay, I just wanted to go. I know it's usually about an hour, but just an extra 20 minutes.
Let's do it. That's cool.
Okay.
I can give you until 12:30. I got to be somewhere at 1. But
all right. So if I can, I know I went on to They Sleep Among Us page on Instagram, and I even tried to find it on YouTube. I couldn't. But I think it's this one.
Yeah, I gotta get better at that. I'm doing a lot by myself right now, so
this is the unicorn wire.
You can it's actually it's pinned on the
first one.
Instagram. Yeah, I think it's the first one. I moved it around a little bit because I'm trying to I'm playing around with the format of the Instagram page, but it's got like a letterbox, and it looks. I think it's like the skyline is like the thumbnail.
Let me share.
Yeah.
Whoops. Let me add to the stream. So.
Yep, it's that first one.
This one. Okay, so I'm gonna play this real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead, go for it.
All right. Why is it?
Ago, cruise in Minneapolis.
You have the capacity to act.
I think it's the sole responsibility of the city of Minneapolis to deal with this.
The people within the encampments themselves are our neighbors.
Homeless encampments are still set up outside of Minneapolis City Hall this afternoon.
And that's following a
Whoops. I'm just trying to see I can make it
tense
bigger.
encounter between protesters and police
I think
on
it's
Tuesday
breaking up a
night.
little bit. Yo, actually, I do have a YouTube link. I'm just going to message you.
Okay. No, that works
it might be
too.
better that way because
that way.
Yeah. I remembered. I did post the trailer on there, and it'll take me only a second. I'm already pretty much there. Here we go. Boom. Share. All right. Thank you, everyone watching, for bearing with us here. I'm gonna hit you on Facebook Messenger. Is that all right?
Yep, that's fine.
Cool. There you go.
And I'm gonna send it to you real quick, John Tell. Because he's better at. That's why he the producer.
Independent media, but I am part also very involved with these camps, and I spend a lot of time meeting with the people in them and showing up and just trying to. I'm filming a documentary, so I've met a lot of people and just had a lot of conversations. And in my experience, what I've seen is that as also a disabilities rights activist, as a disabled person myself, is that many of these residents are just disabled people. A lot of these people can't work. There's a narrative that there's people are living in tents because of drugs. And, you know, a recent survey showed that about 50% of people living in camps are too disabled to work. They're like me. How do you live 3 years with no income? And yet here I am. How do I not end up in an encampment? I'm not on drugs.
Gotta give us some sound.
Yeah.
John Tell. No, I'm just kidding. He about to yell at me. I'm not sure what he's doing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is he froze now?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Oh, is he froze? I think he might be. He froze. No, he's not. I can see him moving. I think he's trying to get it set up.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you know, a show is good if it's got technical difficulties.
No,
so.
my
Right.
bad. That was my bad because I just played the whole thing, but my mic was muted.
Right,
So,
that's what I thought.
yeah. So let me go.
That's what you get with independent media, y'all.
That's what you deal with independent media. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Who's evicted people from an encampment in Minneapolis?
If you have the capacity, you have the responsibility to act.
I don't think it's the sole responsibility of the city of Minneapolis to deal with this.
The people within the encampments themselves are not illegal. They're human beings. They are our neighbors.
Homeless encampments are still set up outside of Minneapolis City Hall this afternoon.
And that's following a tense encounter between protesters and police on Tuesday night.
People are calling up the shelter hotline. There are no beds.
They say ain't no love in these streets. When I'm out here, they can't say that.
Yo,
that was
amazing work.
Right. And you know,
more epic if you got the surround sound or something, you know what I mean? I'm not trying.
Right. You know, it as being, you know, somebody who is currently homeless, and just, you know, we stay in a hotel, you know, we're not in a tent or anything by the grace of God. But I know that per se, even just for ourselves, of the services of they give you these numbers to call, and it's one big roundabout. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I call it a Ponzi scheme.
We call
kind
it
of
that.
is. Yeah, it kind of is. It probably actually literally is. Yeah.
Right.
Let me break that one down a little bit. Wow.
A
Think about
pyramid,
it.
pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
One points to the other person. You go to them, they point to another person.
Yep, that's
You got to
exactly what
jump through all
happens.
these hoops. It's ridiculous.
And they're all collecting funding. They're all making funding along the way. They're all, you know what I'm saying?
Because if they really wanted for us to get rehabilitated or for us to get the help that we need, they would just go ahead and give us a home and then help us. Like there's other countries. There's an episode, I think it's by Second Thought via YouTube. One of those people on YouTube, very informative. They talk about how other countries, they give you the housing first. And then to keep that housing, you have to go through those hoops to get yourself together. You start off paying 0 rent. By the end of the year, you have to, or by a certain time period, you pay 100% of the rent, and they help you throughout, whether it's mental health services, medication, therapy, a job, to get you completely stable. So by the end of that time period, there shouldn't be any excuse as to why. And if there is, they can pinpoint that and help that too. They take care of it all. We don't do that here. Why? Because we really don't want people having home. We want people on the streets or renting. That's the name of the game in America, in this capitalist system. Let's be clear. We know what it is. We're tired of trying to play their game. And for me, at least, we asked you, like, what was your personal, like, why are you in this, and what is it that you do? For me, I think that's one of the tools that we have. It's just being informative in general, because if we have a notch on our belt, a tool in our pocket of knowing what the hell they're doing to us overall, at the very least, do you know what I mean? What they're doing to us overall, we can at least have better thoughts and better actions, thinking better about what decisions we're making on a regular hourly basis. How am I going to, what better health decisions am I making, as far as like, how am I eating? Am I packing my lunch? Seriously though, am I packing my lunch with things that are making me think clearer, knowing that I'm going to bust my ass at this warehouse job 12 hours and no, I'm not going to have a fucking life anymore? But am I doing this to actually get ahead? Am I going to get ahead? Like the homeboy said in your documentary, like, we can be as positive as we want. We need to be positive in this mind frame, in this day and age. However, we still have to be realistic. We have to be proactive in order to get ahead of them. This is the name of the game, right? So if that's the only, let me start the basic. The only way we're going to get anywhere is to be proactive. Informing people is the way to do that. Because if they have something to work with, they have a better idea of what direction they're going and how they can navigate this whole system. Do you know what I mean? And going back to the Ponzi scheme thing, the three of us have been through the hoops of this system, knowing what kind of answers and what kind of resources we're going to be fed, right?
Yeah.
We rely on our tenacity, our grit, our personality, our uniqueness, the things that we've done our entire lives and community to get us where we need to go. However, thinking about going forward, that's not just enough. You know, we need more. And I think everything that we've spoke to today, like, that's it in its totality. I think that's a bigger, that's our calling. That's a big reason as to why at least the three of us do this. You know, what else can we fucking do? We've all, at least the three of us here on this webisode, have our unique reasons as to why we're doing this, but they're very similar. And I can't help but imagine what everyone else's reasons are, whether selfish or not, whether they're actually doing something to contribute in this movement, or they're doing something just for the preservation of keeping their kids alive and making sure that their kids are educated properly and fed and bathed and clothed, whether they're living out of their Jeep in a hotel with their kids, because it happens. It's so common, you know, like we all, in this day and age, in this world, in this country, are doing something, whether it's hustling another day just to feed ourselves selfishly. I'm not judging, because you know what I mean? Or whether we're spending day in and day out, not making an actual living, but broadcasting the truth, because it's important, because we're finding out that there's young high school kids today that don't even know the difference between integration and segregation. How are we going to get anywhere?
Independent media.
Right.
It's up to us. We keep us safe. We inform ourselves. Listen, I grew up in South Minneapolis. They didn't listen. Oh my God. I went to a school called Ramsey. All right. I didn't know who Ramsey was until after George Floyd got killed. Literally.
Wow.
I didn't know who Governor Ramsey. For everyone not living in Minnesota, he was the first governor in Minnesota. Now, don't you think a school named after the first governor of the state you're living in, like, don't you think you should teach who that is in that school?
Right.
There's a reason they didn't teach us who he is, and that's because he is the name. Him and actually Abraham Lincoln during emancipation, unfortunately, actually held the largest mass execution in U.S. history. They lynched, they hung 38 Dakota men, basically, simultaneously, and then plus 2 additional ones after the fact. So it was 38 plus 2. The last 2 were part of it, but it was not simultaneous. That was because Alexander Ramsey was pushing the Indian Removal Act and trying to get all of the Dakota out of Minnesota. So, you know, he's a genocidal, I don't even know, monster. Like, so we didn't even know who that was in the school. So they're not going to teach us, you know what I mean? So we have to teach each other. And that means
That's right.
learning first, learning so we can becoming educated so we can educate each other, right?
Exactly.
And that's what all of us is. That's what all 3 of us do. Imagine who we're bringing in right now, you know?
Right.
Right.
In all of our unique modes and routes of the way that we bring our viewpoints to the world is also what adds to it, because we can't all do it all.
No, we
You know?
can't. No, we can't. And that's one thing. That I sit here and I think about the situations that we've experienced. I just remember the times we in Uptown, you know, Winston Smith, you know, of the pain, the trauma,
It's real.
and to sit there and experience it, and then to verbalize it, to explain it where people can not maybe put themselves in that situation, but to at least understand, you know, with compassion, because that's why I like documenting, because I want to show people, I want to change the narrative. I want to put out a side that is regardless if it's the good, the bad, the ugly, but let's find out what that core issue is. We're not just going to call them lazy or alcoholics or drug addicts. No, let's get to the core issue of why. Is it because there wasn't no education? Is it because maybe they have a learning disability? Is it because they can't get their mental health under control? You know what I'm saying? Nobody, I'm not going to say nobody, but the powers that be don't like to get to the core issue.
No.
Well, they don't like to get to the core issue because they know the truth, and they know if we knew the truth, that wouldn't be going on.
Right. No, I really do. Thank you, Aaron. If there's anything that I will be putting links of how to follow you. If there's any way that we can, us at the Leon Block can support you in any form of fashion, please don't ever hesitate to reach out for whatever it is.
You know, likewise, I appreciate that. And I mean that too. I'm not just saying like likewise, like, you know, we are in the same scene, we are in the same world, we're in, you know, we're in some different struggles, but we're struggling with a lot of the same things. And, you know, so likewise, you know.
No, and that's one thing that who keeps us safe, we keep us safe. And so I will continue doing supporting and standing in solidarity. You know, I know we've been still probably be in the same areas, might not even know it, might be by surprise. But I do love the work that you're doing. And I hope that your documentary does make the awareness that that I hope that it does. I hope that it changes the narrative. I hope that it starts conversations of how people can solve the core issues and not just keep on putting a Band-Aid over something. Because that's what we're seeing is a lot of Band-Aids and not
really
enough
expensive ones.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and not enough permanent solutions. You know, they're Band-Aid solutions and not something that is, you know, they leave it where the wound can open back up, not where it can suture it and make sure that it at least if it opens back up, it's going to be tough, you know.
Yeah.
But I want to give you the your final thoughts. The last couple minutes, I want you to. The floor is yours.
All right, I appreciate it. I feel like I'm like stepping up to open mic night or something. But I guess basically, you know, I would just like to piggyback on what you just said real quick because, like, you know, there's never going to be a solution, and I'll tell you why. Is because cruelty is the point. I saw somebody in a comment just now, you know, talking about what's wrong or right, and I don't want to be like it's not bad because I'm not even trying to like say anything about that, but just a thought and something I've been kind of saying lately is that it's not what's right or wrong, it's what you can get away with. And I think right now our city is and all of ours and just, you know, I mean, let's just go there, like just I'm not trying to sound like a certain way, but like just capitalism and the effects of capitalism on our medical systems, on our justice systems, departments, whatever. I think they all become money motivated by default. And so similarly, you know, we've got all these unhoused encampments. They don't want to necessarily solve homelessness because unhoused people, homeless people, the lowest class, you know, the lowest wealth class within capitalism serves a function, which is to remind people how much worse things could be. And so when you're going to your $7 an hour job, you know, after you just got off your $7.50 an hour job, it's like you put up with that because you see how much worse things could get, and maybe you have a kid and you don't want them being in that environment or whatever it is. So there's entire lucrative industries that are all intertwined, that, you know, there are nonprofit so-called sort of segments that make money. They have a very wealthy CEO, you know what I'm saying? Like they're trying to stay in business also. So if they don't got a product anymore, what's their business? You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of initiative, or what am I trying to say? You know what I'm trying to say though? Like they want to keep things a certain way.
Right.
Because we serve a function on the lowest rungs.
Yep.
That's really what I got. I'm sure I'll be in the shower later, you know, tomorrow, like, I should have said
right.
in the comments, I'll add more later, maybe.
You know, I think we always have as an independent journalist, there's all these things that we could always sit here and say. And as you just said that, I wanted to wrap up really quick and state really quick while we can do this so we can do a little more promo for you. This was the Urban Conservative They Sleep Among Us interview with Aaron Johnson, who is an activist and independent journalist out of the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, Minnesota, who is bringing awareness to the issues surrounding houselessness, homelessness, encampments in and around the area of Minneapolis and what goes on. Definitely check it out. And stay tuned for more from him. He's a very powerful, not only just activist, but independent journalist, bringing you raw street journalism footage, as he likes to say. So please go ahead and check him out. Big shout out to Aaron Johnson. Thank you so much for being on our show, man. Appreciate it. Please check out the documentary.
Thank you.
Yes, and as we always say on the Urban Conservative, win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell, wish us well.
Every day, fighting for my life. Every day, fighting for my life. Fighting for my life. Fighting for my bread. Grew from the seed. fire, bred desire to rise above denial, to rise from former ashes to face new trial or triumph. I am enough. Trial to triumph. I am enough. Every day I fight for my life. Every day fighting for my life.